Okay, so welcome to Thought Process. This is a series where I showcase some of my daily cooking and the thought process that goes behind actually cooking these dishes. So this is a Cantonese style congee or porridge recipe, and it's one of the many variations of porridge in Asian culture. Now, this Cantonese style porridge is a savory porridge often served with all kinds of meat like chicken, pork, fish, seafood, and even frog meat, either in the porridge itself or also as a side dish. Now, before I go into the actual recipe, I want to quickly explain why I made the congee. So you see, my girlfriend was going for a vacation trip with her friends. However, that trip kind of got cut short when someone in her group tested positive for COVID, and eventually almost everyone in that group got COVID too. Now, a very quick PSA, that individual who first tested positive for COVID, she had symptoms when they first left for the trip, but tested negative on a RTK test kit. Now, in Malaysia and many parts of the world, we're currently facing new waves of COVID, and so I really want to encourage everyone, if you have symptoms like a fever, sore throat, etc., it's probably safe to assume that you may have COVID and isolate yourself, get tested frequently. And if you do have symptoms and you have plans, do inform people around you. So just like many of you out there, although fully vaccinated, my girlfriend still felt quite sick, and I kind of want to cheer her up with some food during her isolation. Now, one of the food that I made in this case was congee. So congee or porridge for many of us in Asia is a type of comfort food, typically served when someone is sick. So this is definitely a good recipe for any of you trying to cheer a loved one up, or if you're trying to take care of yourself because you're down with COVID. It's a really simple but equally delicious recipe for you to make at home. So I start out with rice, and here you can really use whatever white rice you have lying around. Short grain, medium grain, long grain, they all work the same. Now I'm using 500 grams of jasmine white rice that I have lying around, and to that I'm rinsing it 3 to 5 times to remove any excess starch. Unless you want your porridge to be really super duper gloopy, please rinse your rice. And besides, there's a lot of dirt and stuff like that you need to get rid of anyways. Now, once it was rinsed, I'm going to transfer my rice to the freezer and freeze it. Now, this is a technique to make the porridge cook faster, as the freezing really helps the rice break down more during the cooking process for that typical congee consistency. Now, on the next day, I took the rice out from the freezer and transferred it to my cooking vessel of choice. And to my rice, and this is key, I'm adding 7 times the liquid, or 3,500 grams of liquid. The general rule of thumb is at least 1 part rice to 7 to 10 parts of water or liquid, right? And I like it thick, so I'm using 1 to 7. Now I'm using some concentrated chicken stock that I made along with some dashi powder to kind of beef up the congee a little bit, and just topping that up with water until it hits the 3,500 grams or milliliters point. You can use plain water with no stock, but I think adding some stock really helps beef up that savory notes of the congee. So if you need to, just use a stock cube, that also works as well, but don't go crazy, just lesser than what you think you would use for traditional stock, if you will. Now I'm cooking using a standard rice setting in a multi-cooker or instant pot. This particular preset in my machine here does involve pressure cooking it, but honestly it's probably much faster on the stove for around 20 minutes of simmering. Now while this cooks away, I'm going to be preparing my add-ons. Now there really isn't any hard and fast rules here, but the general rule of thumb is that you kind of want to add ingredients that contribute some level of sweetness, like cabbages, carrots and whatnot, and also ingredients that add some form of savory notes as well. So all kinds of meat would work. Sausages would work perfectly fine as well, whether it's a typical Italian sausage or even a Chinese lapcheong or sausage as well. Now for this batch, I started with some shiitake mushrooms, just sliced, and followed that with some napa cabbage and leeks. Now all these 3 ingredients add a lot of sweetness to the congee, and to help the process of consuming it, I'm slicing it really thin so they kind of break down into the congee itself. Now next, I also prepared some spring onions, finally sliced ginger, century eggs, and also salted eggs. These are all typical ingredients you would find in a traditional Cantonese congee anyways. Both the century egg and the salted egg can be served separately as a garnish, but I also like to chop them up and mix it into the congee itself. Now onto my meats, I'm starting with some minced pork, to which I am adding some oyster sauce, cornstarch, sodium bicarb, white pepper, salt, and some dashi powder and some sugar. all of which are classic meat marinade ingredients for Chinese cooking, and you can really use this same style of marinating for all kinds of meat. Chicken, turkey, you name it, or beef for that matter. The marinade really makes it really tender, and when you cook it up as a patty, it really falls apart really nicely, especially if you are going to be simmering it away in a liquid, or in this case, congee. Now the other meat that I'm also going to be adding is some sliced pork. Now here I got some pork short loin. The thing about short loin is that it's really lean, it's really flavoursome, but it can be quite tough. But lucky for us, we can definitely do something about that toughness. So first, I'm going to remove all that silver skin on the surface of the pork, and I'm going to follow that up by breaking it down further into small, more manageable pieces. I'm going to take those pieces and slice them against the grain, which allows for the meat to break apart more easily in the mouth later when eating. Now in Chinese cooking, we can further tenderize this using a very simple marinade, and this marinade starts with some xiaoxing rice wine, some soy sauce, white pepper, sodium bicarb, cornstarch, and sugar. The sodium bicarb being alkali actually tenderizes the meat quite a fair bit, and because of the way we cut it, it all contributes to how it falls apart in the mouth. This same trick works for all kinds of lean meat, whether it's chicken breast, turkey breast, lean beef, or stir fries. They all work the same with this basic style of marinade. Now, so the time is up and the porridge is cooked. So traditionally, to get that congee consistency, you need the rice grains to literally break apart and puree away. Now we can do this by using a simple whisk, and the whisk plus the rice freezing technique that we did earlier enables that whole grain texture breakdown in less than a minute of whisking. While traditionally you might need to even use a blender, but hey, no blender needed for today. Now to that, I'm going to add all my veggies, and yes, it's clearly way too much, but you know what, I wanted to make a lot and I wanted to make it last. Now once the veggies are in, I'm going to take my minced pork and add them in balls or dollops, which will then slowly cook away in the porridge. I'm going to follow that up with the pork slices, the chopped century and salted eggs, and let it cook away for anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes, just to let it cook through, but also let that sweetness and the savoury notes of the vegetables and meat seep into the congee itself. Now at this point, I decided to separate it out into two separate pots for easy stirring and subsequently easy delivery to my girlfriend. I then added my sliced ginger, spring onion, and some final seasoning in the form of some soy sauce and some sesame oil. And there you have it. It's a really simple, comforting congee dish for someone who's feeling under the weather, or just really a comforting meal over a rainy day. I hope you enjoyed the video. There are more videos like this coming out soon, and if you want to check them out, please do subscribe, and I will see you next time.